You are not aware of the creature you have created inside yourself. I am not talking about a monster, nor a hero. I am talking about something far more dangerous, something the world cannot categorize, predict, or understand. Someone who has learned to exist without needing anyone. And to a society built on dependency and approval, that is a threat. You have spent too much time alone, and now the rest don't know how to read you. They mistake your silence for emptiness. But your silence is not absence. It is a weapon. While others suffocate under the desperate need to be seen, to be validated, to be approved, you have learned to move like a shadow, watching without being seen, gathering every fragment of information in the room while revealing nothing of your own. They live out loud and drain themselves for attention. You move in stillness and build in silence. They think the loudest voice wins, but you've discovered something more enduring, the one who listens without reacting, who speaks only when it's time to strike, controls the entire game. You have seen how people reveal themselves in contradictions, in nervous laughter, in the silence between their words. They believe that truth is found in what they say, but you've learned that the real truth lives in what they avoid saying. While they rush to impress, you watch. While they explain, you observe. And when they finally show their cards, you act, quietly, without theatrics, without warning. The power you've developed is rooted in something others would never dare to face. The experience of complete solitude. Loneliness to them is a punishment. To you, it was a crucible. It was war. And you survived it with hunger, with fear, with nights where your own mind tried to sabotage you. But you endured. You breathed through the fire. And you came out colder, sharper, lethal in ways they will never anticipate. In your silence, you trained. You studied the way people operate, their patterns, their triggers, their fragile egos. You began to see the world not as it appears, but as it truly is. You saw through smiles designed to manipulate, words tailored to deceive. You stopped believing in the stories people tell about themselves and started dissecting their behavior. While they mistake charisma for character, you see past it. You don't guess. You know. Because in the solitude they fear, you built a mind that cannot be fooled. You also learned the power of choosing who enters your space. You no longer chase connection for the sake of filling a void. You don't settle for company that costs you your clarity. You understand now that a mediocre ally is more dangerous than a known enemy. That fake loyalty is more poisonous than open hate. You stopped trying to convince people to stay, to understand, to walk with you, because dragging someone who doesn't want to move is the slowest form of self-destruction. You've paid the price for this awareness, and you paid it in full. But you don't regret it, because there is no loneliness more suffocating than being surrounded by the wrong people. You now guard your energy like a fortress. The world celebrates exposure, demands performance. But you have learned the opposite, the devastating power of anonymity. While they seek recognition, you seek results. While they obsess over credit, you focus on impact. They want to be seen. You want to be remembered. Not for the noise you made, but for the silence that preceded your arrival. You do not broadcast your steps. You don't announce your victories. Because you understand, the most powerful strike is the one no one saw coming. Loneliness wasn't a setback. It was your training ground. The silence didn't mute you. It refined you. It didn't break you. It honed you. Like water carving through rock, solitude sculpted you into something the world can't comprehend. Now, every decision you make is rooted in a clarity that comes from answering only to yourself. You no longer wait for permission. You don't explain your process. You own your time, your thoughts, your path. And what now? Now you hold something they cannot touch. Independence. Real independence, not the fantasy sold in motivational slogans. Independence from approval, from validation, from noise. You learned the secret most never will, that the one who needs no one cannot be controlled. And nothing terrifies them more than someone they cannot bend. They don't understand how you became this. They think you were always this strong, but they don't see the nights you spent battling your own demons. They don't see the wounds that taught you not to bleed in public. They don't know what it took to become unreadable. Yes, unreadable. That is your true advantage now, because when people can't read you, they fear you. They cannot predict you. They don't know whether you are planning, resting, or preparing to strike. That uncertainty is your shield. That silence is your camouflage. While they guess, you calculate. While they react, you anticipate. They create stories to make sense of you. They label you cold, distant, mysterious, because that's easier than accepting the truth. The truth is you simply stopped playing their game. You stopped reacting the way they wanted you to. You stopped giving away your attention, your energy, your plans. And they hate it. Because now they cannot use you. They cannot manipulate you. And so they fear you. Not because you are cruel, but because you are free. But freedom comes at a price. And this is where most fail. The price is silence. The price is patience. The price is not being understood. Because the moment you break your silence to prove yourself, you give them ammunition. You give them something to aim at. The moment you feel the need to prove you are working, growing, building, you fall into their trap. That's when your ego takes over. And ego is the enemy of strategy. You have learned to tame your ego, to treat it like a beast that must be kept caged and fed only enough to survive, but never to lead. The ego wants recognition. The ego wants to show off. The ego wants to be seen, praised, applauded. But you no longer serve your ego. You use it. You harness its fire, but you never let it set your direction. This is where your solitude turns into a new kind of strength. Strategic patience. Not waiting idly, not sitting back hoping, but building in the shadows. Planning in silence. Acting only when the moment cannot be ignored. Because you've seen what happens to dreamers who talk too soon. Their ideas die before they're even born. But the planner, the silent operator, emerges with something no one saw coming, and nothing can stop. Time is now your weapon. You don't rush. You don't chase. You don't need the world to know what you're doing. Because while they spend their days posting, shouting, seeking applause, you are constructing something that doesn't need attention to survive. It only needs to be finished. And that is where the real shift begins. You rise above the emotional chaos that consumes others. You don't get pulled into petty arguments. You don't respond to every insult. You don't waste yourself defending your name to people who don't deserve to speak it, because you've realized something vital. Defending everything drains the strength needed for what truly matters. The one who fights every battle becomes a prisoner of those battles. The one who ignores the irrelevant becomes untouchable. It is here that solitude stops being a stage and becomes your base of operations. You are not isolated, you are positioned. Like a sniper with a view of the entire field, you don't reveal yourself until the shot is guaranteed. You choose when to appear, when to retreat, when to let them believe they've won, only to re-emerge when their guard is down and their resources spent. This is not about cowardice. It's not about hiding. It's about calculation. Because you've learned the deepest secret, true power is not constant domination. It is the mastery of when to act and when not to. If you're always on display, you become predictable. If you constantly assert your power, you exhaust it. But when you reserve it, when you wait, when you strike only when necessary, your power multiplies. They burn themselves out trying to stay relevant every day. You, on the other hand, move slowly, deliberately, invisibly. And by the time they notice, it's too late. You're already too far ahead. The game ended long ago, and you were the only one who knew it. In this space of silence and stillness, you begin to see the world for what it truly is. Most people don't act, they react. Their decisions are not based on planning, but on impulse. They speak because they feel uncomfortable in silence. They move because stillness makes them nervous. They attack not out of strategy, but out of fear. You used to be like them, but not anymore. Now you move at the pace of your plan. They move at the pace of their emotions. They rush. You pause. They panic. You observe. That difference is everything. It is the line between the manipulated and the master, and with that control comes something few ever achieve: detachment. The day you stopped needing immediate results was the day you became immune to manipulation. They can compliment you or insult you. It doesn't change your course. They can tempt you with rewards or threaten you with loss, and it doesn't move you an inch. Because detachment doesn't mean apathy. It means immunity. You feel, but you are not ruled by those feelings. You respond, but you are not driven by reactions. This is where you cross into a new kind of strength, a kind of luxury most can't afford. Not the luxury of having more, but of needing less. Less validation, less distraction, less emotional noise. You begin clearing space inside yourself, like removing debris from a battlefield. Step by step, the unnecessary is eliminated, until what remains is solid, precise, clean. From that place, every action carries more force, because it is focused and unclouded by desperation or doubt. You gain a new clarity about people too. Without the fog of need, you begin to see motives. You can tell who flatters and who means it, who lies and who fears being caught, who approaches you with hidden intentions and who offers their loyalty without a hidden price. This ability to read people isn't something you perform. It becomes instinct. And it is ruthless, because once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. This is where your solitude becomes something even deeper, a laboratory of the mind. You don't just sit in silence, you dissect yourself, not to wallow, but to improve. You study your flaws like a scientist studies weakness in a structure. You examine your fears, your failures, your reactions. You begin to eliminate behaviors that no longer serve your mission. You strip away illusions. You destroy the parts of yourself that once needed applause, that once feared judgment. You build from within, quietly, methodically. No one sees it. No one praises it. But the structure you're building is unshakable. Most people will never understand this process because they need an audience to feel real. They need eyes on them to feel like they exist. But you've evolved past that. You can sit in an empty room and feel whole. You don't need to be witnessed to be valid. You exist, and that is enough. Because you know the world doesn't reward noise, it rewards precision. And you are building something so exact, so impossible to replicate, that when it finally emerges, it will require no introduction. It will be undeniable. And this, ironically, is where things get dangerous. Not for you, but for them. Because you no longer seek to dominate, but your very existence becomes a threat. It disturbs them. It reminds them that they too could escape their chains, if only they had the courage. But they don't, and your presence becomes a mirror they can't look away from, a reflection of their own untapped potential and the fear that they will never touch it. You, however, have already crossed the point of no return. You've burned the bridge back to comfort, to mediocrity, to the herd. You no longer belong to the rules they follow, the social rituals, the performance of fitting in, the hunger for likes, for inclusion. You've left all that behind. You don't orbit their expectations. You are your own axis. They can't lure you with flattery. They can't trap you with guilt. You've left the emotional marketplace where people barter their identity for approval. You do not negotiate your worth anymore, and that makes you something rare, unclassifiable. You can't be boxed in, defined, controlled, and your solitude, once seen as weakness, becomes your strategic advantage. You control access to yourself. You control what people know. And when they can't predict your presence, your value rises. Scarcity breeds significance. They try to be everywhere, in every conversation, every trend, but their overexposure makes them disposable. You do the opposite. You are rarely seen. But when you do appear, everything shifts. Not because you demand it, but because your presence carries weight. You've become the embodiment of the law of scarcity, not just in action, but in being. And with that scarcity, you've cultivated something most cannot manufacture: mystery. Mystery is both your shield and your sword. It protects you from intrusion. It attracts without effort. It forces others to wonder, to speculate. They try to map your intentions, decode your strategy, anticipate your next move, but they fail because you have become unreadable by design. And mystery is destroyed the moment you explain yourself. That's the discipline you now live by. You do not explain. You do not justify. You do not share your inner world with those who haven't earned the right. Because even the closest must earn your transparency. Even loyalty is tested. And when you do choose to reveal something, it is deliberate, not out of pressure, not out of fear, but out of control. You've learned that every explanation is a key handed over to someone who might use it to unlock doors you never meant to open. In this elevated state, solitude no longer isolates you. It elevates you. You see everything now, the whole battlefield, like a strategist standing above the chaos, not because he fears the fight, but because he needs to understand the terrain before entering it. And from that vantage point, you choose your every move with surgical precision. Every word, every silence, every appearance, because you no longer play to win petty skirmishes. You play to win the war. And in that war, the most powerful position is not to be everywhere. It is to be unseen until it is too late. Not hidden in fear, but positioned in silence. Like a force of nature gathering momentum quietly. Like a storm, the sky forgets until it breaks without warning. You let the world grow used to your absence, and then you strike. You strike not out of rage, not out of ego, but because the moment has ripened. Because your silence has done its work. Because the forest no longer senses the predator, and that's when it's most vulnerable. This is how you've reshaped your power, not in volume, but in timing. And timing, as you've learned, is everything. You don't move by the clock others obey. You don't operate on the same urgency. You have mastered the slow burn, the long game, the cold patience that breaks those who rely on momentum alone. And this is where your mind, trained in silence, becomes something greater than just a vessel for thoughts. It becomes an intelligence system. You no longer merely observe people. You study patterns. You don't just anticipate reactions. You predict them with precision. You store data quietly, connect threads others don't even see. While they chase moments, you stack advantages. While they panic and adapt under pressure, you execute the plan you've already tested 100 times in your solitude. But the most brilliant part, you don't need to move fast. You've stopped wasting energy on unnecessary motion. You let time do part of the work for you, because time to most is pressure, but to you, it's leverage. The impatient drown in it. You ride its current with calm calculation. You've discovered that time rewards those who don't flinch. It exposes the weak, reveals the fake, collapses false structures, and amplifies the solid. And you, through your solitude, have made yourself solid. From here, you gain a new power, the power to ignore. You no longer fight every battle. You don't take every opportunity. You don't chase every opening that glitters with promise. Because you've realized that some battles are not meant to be won. They are traps, emotional ambushes disguised as victories, and winning them costs more than losing ever would. So you let them pass, not from fear, but from clarity. You choose your wars, your enemies, your battles. And the ability to walk away without a scratch is itself a kind of dominance few recognize. The enemy who does not tempt you cannot control you. This selective detachment begins to change you at your core. You no longer treat power as an emotional reward. You treat it as a tool, functional, precise, unemotional. You do not seek to prove you are powerful. You simply use power when it serves the mission. You do not intoxicate yourself with attention, nor allow victory to distract you from the next step. You begin to measure every decision by a single question. Does this serve the mission? And when power becomes a tool, not a trophy, the entire game shifts. You are no longer at the mercy of luck, mood, or momentum. Everything hinges on your preparation, and you've prepared in a place few dare to go. In the silence, in the shadows, where nobody claps, nobody watches, and nobody reassures you. That is where the strongest are made. And now, you've become something the world doesn't quite know how to define. An enigma to some, a silent threat to others, a ghost that glides past noise and chaos, leaving only outcomes behind. But here's the truth. You never set out to be any of those things. You don't want the role of the villain, the mystery, or the mastermind. You want clarity. You want precision. You want peace through discipline. And that desire makes you unpredictable. In a world obsessed with being seen, you build in silence. In a world that confuses noise for strength, you've become fluent in the language of quiet execution. And that, by its very nature, challenges everything around you. You've become a reminder, not just of what people could be, but what they're afraid to become, because it costs something. And you've paid it. You've burned the bridge to needing approval. You've left behind the need to be understood. You've stopped offering pieces of yourself to earn comfort from others. And in that sacrifice, you gained what few possess: the ability to control access to yourself. Not everyone sees you. Not everyone hears from you. Not everyone gets to reach you. And that controlled access increases your value. The law of scarcity doesn't just apply to things. It applies to people. You're not everywhere. You're not always available. And that is why you're never forgotten. While others seek to flood the room with their presence, you've become the blind spot. The space no one monitors, because they assume what is silent isn't dangerous, and that assumption is their downfall. Because when you move, you change the rules, not with noise, not with spectacle, but with outcome. You've stopped playing for attention. You've started shaping the board itself. This is the true discipline of power, not to dominate with presence, but to alter the terrain so your presence becomes destiny. And that's what you are now, an invisible architect of fate. Others wait for the perfect moment. You create it. Others need to be remembered. You make yourself unforgettable by mastering the art of arrival. You provoke the moment when it matters most. You don't need to be seen beforehand. You simply appear when there is no other option.